The world was upside down. That was the first thing my brain registered, not the pain, not the screaming metal, but the fact that the asphalt was above my head and the sky was somewhere below my feet. I was hanging by my seatbelt, the strap digging into my collarbone with the pressure of a vice grip. There was a metallic taste in my mouth, copper and fear, and when I tried to inhale, a sharp, jagged fire ripped through my rib cage. I didn't know it then, but my spleen had ruptured, and I was internally bleeding into my own abdominal cavity. All I knew was that I had to pick up my phone. My twins. Leo and Mia were at daycare, but the center closed in 20 minutes. If I didn't get there, or if someone didn't get there, Child Protective Services would be called. That was the rule. My hand shook uncontrollably as I reached for the cracked screen of my phone, which had landed on the ceiling of the car, or was it the floor? I couldn't tell anymore. My vision was swimming black spots dancing at the edges like vultures waiting to feed. I dialed the only number I had memorized by heart, the number I had called every day for 32 years, seeking approval I never got. Hello. My mother's voice was sharp, impatient. It was the tone she used when a telemarketer called during dinner. Mom. I wheezed the word bubbling up through the blood in my throat. Mom, help, accident, car flip. Clara. Her voice didn't soften. It went up an octave, not in concern, but in annoyance. Clara, you cannot be doing this right now. Do you have any idea what time it is? Sophia is having a meltdown about her hair. The gala starts in 2 hours. Mom, please. I gasped, tears mixing with the grit on my face. I think I'm dying. I'm trapped. The ambulance is coming, but the twins, Leo and Mia, you have to get them. Please. There was a huff of breath on the other end, a sigh so heavy it felt like it traveled through the phone lines to slap me in the face. For God's sake, Clara, you're always so dramatic. It's probably a fender bender and you're panicking. I cannot leave Sophia right now. This is the biggest night of her life. She's nominated for Influencer of the Year. Do you understand how bad it would look if I just walked out because you can't drive properly? Mom, I'm bleeding. I whispered, my consciousness slipping. Please, figure it out, Clara. You're the doctor. Isn't that what you always brag about? You're the smart one, the independent one. Stop trying to ruin your sister's moment. The line went dead. I stared at the screen, the silence louder than the sirens wailing in the distance. I was 32 years old, a board-certified anesthesiologist, a mother of 2, and I was dying in a ditch. And my mother had just hung up on me because my sister's hair wasn't right. A moment later, the screen lit up again. I felt a surge of pathetic hope. Maybe she realized. Maybe she was calling back to say she was on her way. But it wasn't a call. It was a notification from the Family Circle group chat. My vision blurred, but I focused every ounce of my remaining will on those words. It was a text from my mother, Linda. Clara, stop being a nuisance. We have VIP tickets and we are not missing the red carpet for your drama. You've always been a burden on this family. Figure it out yourself. Below it, my father, Mark, had added a thumbs-up emoji. And then Sophia, my golden child sister, the 26-year-old lifestyle guru who lived in a condo I paid for, chimed in. OMG, can she ever let me have one day? She's probably just doing this for attention because I'm trending. LOL. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a bone this time. It was the tether. The invisible iron chain that had bound me to them for 3 decades, the chain that made me beg for scraps of love, broke. It didn't break with a bang. It broke with a quiet, icy resolve that flooded my veins colder than the shock setting in. Ma'am, can you hear me? A paramedic's face appeared in the shattered window upside down. We're going to get you out. My phone, I choked out, thrusting the device toward him. Unlock code 1992. Contacts VIP nanny services. Call them. Tell them I authorize the emergency retainer. $5,000. Get my kids. The paramedic looked at me, stunned by the clarity of my order amidst the carnage, but he nodded. We'll do it. Stay with us. Before I pass out, I whispered, grabbing his sleeve, my blood staining his reflective vest. Make sure you tell the nanny. The grandparents are not on the list. No one is on the list. Then the darkness took me. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of monitors. It was a sound I lived with every day at work, a sound that usually meant I was in control, keeping someone else alive. Now it was keeping me alive. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I tried to shift, but a bolt of agony shot through my abdomen, pinning me to the mattress. Easy, Clara, don't try to move. The voice was soft familiar. I blinked my eyes open, hoping, despite everything, to see my father in the chair, or maybe my aunt. But it was Dr. Julian Hayes, the chief of surgery, and my colleague. He looked exhausted, his scrub cap still in his hand, dark circles under his eyes. Julian, I croaked. The twins, they're fine, he said, immediately pulling a chair closer. The agency you called was incredibly professional. They picked them up, fed them, and put them to bed. The nanny is still at your house. She's sending updates every hour. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Thank you. Did you operate? He nodded grimly. Splenectomy. You lost a lot of blood, Clara. It was touch and go for about 20 minutes there. You're lucky the fire department got there when they did. He paused, his expression hardening. I checked your emergency contacts. I called your parents 4 times during the surgery. No answer. I closed my eyes. They were busy. Busy. Julian's voice rose slightly, a rare display of anger from a man known for his ice-cold demeanor in the OR. Clara, their daughter, was on an operating table. I left voicemails telling them you might not make it. Check Instagram. I said, my voice flat. Look up Sophia_style_icon. Julian frowned, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, and then the color drained from his face. He turned the screen toward me. There they were, a video posted 3 hours ago. My mother wearing a silver gown that I knew cost $4,000 because I had transferred the money for it last week, labeled medical bill assistance. She was holding a champagne flute, laughing, her head thrown back. My father was in a tuxedo, his arm around Sophia, who was posing with a glittering award. The caption read, "Family is everything. So proud of our girl. Best night of our lives. #blessed #golden girl." They posted this, Julian said, his voice quiet with disgust, while you were in the ICU. They think I'm lying, I said. They think I made up the accident to ruin their night. That's the narrative. That's not a narrative, Clara. That's abuse. Julian stood up, pacing the small room. I've worked with you for 5 years. I've seen you work double shifts, take on extra calls, come in on holidays. I always thought you were just ambitious. But you were paying for them, weren't you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Hand me my phone, Julian. Clara, you need to rest. Give me my phone. He hesitated, then reached into the plastic patient belongings bag and handed it to me. The screen was cracked spiderwebs of glass obscuring the display, but it still worked. I unlocked it. My thumb hovered over the family circle chat. It was still there. The last message was Sophia's LOL. I didn't reply. I didn't send a photo of my staples or my bruised face. I didn't beg. I exited the messaging app and opened my banking app. Face ID didn't work because of the swelling, so I typed in my passcode. My balance stared back at me. It was healthy, but it should have been massive. I was a specialist in a high-demand field. I should have been a millionaire by now, but I wasn't because of the recurring transfers tab. I clicked it. The list was a testament to my own stupidity. Mom and Dad mortgage $4,500 per month, set to transfer on the 1st. Sophia allowance $2,000 per month, set to transfer on the 5th. Parents' country club dues, $850 per month. Dad's car lease, $900 per month. Mom's therapy spa, $600 per month. It had started 8 years ago. Just until Dad gets back on his feet, they said. The market is down, they said. We sacrificed everything for your medical school, they said. That was the hook they always used. They paid for my undergrad barely and held it over my head like a sword of Damocles. When I started making real money, they presented the bill. But the bill never ended. It just grew. Clara, Julian asked, watching me intently. 8 years, I murmured, doing the math in my head. Almost $400,000 directly. Probably another $100,000 in emergencies and loans they never paid back. I looked at the date. It was the 30th of the month. The big mortgage transfer, the one that kept them in the sprawling estate they pretended they could afford, was scheduled to go out in 24 hours. I tapped the screen. Cancel series. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment? Yes. I went down the list. Sophia's allowance cancel. The country club cancel, the lease cancel, the spa cancel. My finger moved with a robotic precision. I wasn't angry. Anger is hot. Anger burns out. This was cold. This was the absolute zero of emotion. I was an anesthesiologist. I knew how to numb things. I was numbing my love for them, systematically shutting down the nerve endings that connected my heart to theirs. What are you doing? Julian asked softly. I'm performing an amputation, I said, my voice devoid of tremors. The limb is gangrenous. It has to go. I finished with the bank. Then I went to my contacts. I clicked on Mom, block caller. I clicked on Dad, block caller. I clicked on Sophia, block caller. Then I opened social media. I didn't post a tragedy status. I didn't ask for prayers. I simply went to my privacy settings and changed everything to locked. Then I removed them, all of them. The aunts who never called unless they needed medical advice, the cousins who only invited me to weddings, hoping for a big gift, and my parents and sister. I set the phone down on the tray table. The silence in the room felt different now. It wasn't lonely. It was clean. Julian, I said, looking at my colleague, really seeing him for the first time, not just as a doctor, but as the only person who had actually shown up. I need a lawyer, a shark. Someone who specializes in financial fraud and property disputes. Julian's eyebrows shot up. Fraud? They think they own that house. I said, a dry, humorless smile touching my lips. But my name is on the deed because my credit was the only way they could refinance 5 years ago. They think I'm just the co-signer, but I've been paying the mortgage alone. In this state, that gives me leverage. I know a guy, Julian said, a slow grin spreading across his face. He eats narcissists for breakfast. I'll call him in the morning. Good. I leaned back against the pillows, the pain medication finally starting to pull me under. And Julian, yeah, if they show up here, if they try to get into this room. Security has already been alerted, he interrupted firmly. You are listed as a do not announce patient. As far as the front desk is concerned, Clara Bennett doesn't exist. You're safe. Safe. For the first time in 32 years, I wasn't the safety net for everyone else. I was just safe. I closed my eyes, picturing the calendar. Tomorrow was the first of the month. Tomorrow, the bank would attempt to pull $4,500 from my account to pay for the roof over my parents' heads, and it would hit a wall. Tomorrow, the text messages would start confused at first, then demanding, then frantic, but they would bounce off the digital wall I had built. They wanted me to figure it out myself, I did. I figured out that I was worth more than a transaction. Julian, I mumbled, sleep dragging me down. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed. He laughed, a genuine sound that warmed the cold room. Subscribed to what your life? Something like that, I whispered, because the next part is going to be a show they never saw coming. The first 48 hours after I cut the financial cord were not filled with the explosive drama I had anticipated. Instead, they were filled with a terrifying, hollow silence. I lay in my hospital bed, the morphine drip humming a low electric tune beside my ear, waiting for the inevitable backlash. I had blocked their numbers, yes, but I expected them to find a way. I expected them to show up at the nurses' station screaming, or to call the hospital administration, or to send the police for a welfare check that was really just a hunt for their missing ATM. But nothing happened. The silence was heavy like the air before a thunderstorm, and it gave me too much time to think. Dr. Julian Hayes was true to his word. He had become the gatekeeper of my recovery, a role he took on with a ferocity that confused the rest of the staff. He wasn't just checking my vitals, he was checking the perimeter. On the morning of my third day, he walked in with a woman I hadn't seen in 2 years, my Aunt Sarah. Sarah was my mother's younger sister, the black sheep of the family, because she had committed the cardinal sin of marrying a high school history teacher and living in a 2-bedroom ranch house instead of a sprawling estate. My parents called her quaint to her face and a failure behind her back. "Oh, honey." Sarah whispered, her eyes filling with tears as she saw the bruising on my face. She dropped a heavy tote bag on the chair and rushed to the bedside, her hands warm and rough from gardening hands that actually did things unlike my mother's manicured claws. "Julian called me. He told me everything." "I'm okay, Aunt Sarah." I managed, though my voice was still raspy from the intubation. "How are the twins?" "The agency said, the agency is gone." She interrupted gently, brushing a strand of hair off my forehead. "I fired them this morning. Leo and Mia are with me. They're sleeping in the guest room. They think Mommy is on a superhero mission to fix her car. I didn't have the heart to tell them the truth yet." The relief that washed over me was so potent it felt like a sedative. "Thank you," I breathed, closing my eyes. I didn't know who else to call. Mom. Mom wouldn't take them. "I know," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a growl. "Julian told me about the text. Clara, I have held my tongue for 30 years because Linda is my sister, but that woman is a monster, and Mark is her enabler. You cannot go back to them. Not this time." "I'm not," I said, opening my eyes to look at the ceiling. "I canceled the transfers, all of them." Sarah froze. She knew the family dynamics better than anyone. She knew that the Carver estate was a house of cards built on my paycheck. "You canceled the mortgage and the cars and the club and Sophia's allowance." Sarah let out a low, impressed whistle. "War is coming, Clara. You know that, right? They won't just be angry. They'll be desperate. People like them. They don't know how to survive without a host." She was right. The war began on the 1st of the month. I wasn't there to see it, but I could feel the reverberations. It started with the payment declined notifications that must have been hitting my father's inbox. Usually at 9 a.m. on the 1st, the mortgage for the estate, $4,500, would seamlessly slide from my account to the bank holding their note. By 9:05 a.m., my mother usually sent a text not saying, "Thank you," but something like, "Did you remember to pay the pool guy too? The water looks cloudy." This time the clock ticked past 9 o'clock, then 10 o'clock. At 10:15, Aunt Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the screen, grimaced, and sent it to voicemail. It rang again immediately. "It's Linda," Sarah said. "She never calls me, never." "She needs a new host," I said, staring at the IV bag. "She's going down the contact list." "She left a voicemail," Sarah said a minute later, holding the phone up. She pressed speaker. "Sarah, it's Linda. Pick up. It's an emergency. We can't find Clara. She's not answering her phone, and there's been a banking error, a serious one. We think her identity might have been stolen. We need to find her immediately before the accounts are frozen. Call me back. It is urgent. Banking error." I laughed, a dry, painful sound. They can't even conceive that I did it on purpose. In their minds, I'm a fixture. I'm the refrigerator or the thermostat. I don't have autonomy. "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked. "Nothing," I said. "Let them sweat." But the sweating stage didn't last long. It was replaced by the panic stage. By the time I was discharged a week later, moving into a temporary Airbnb that Julian had helped me secure, because I didn't feel safe at my own apartment, which my parents had a key to the narrative had shifted. My cousin, a sweet girl named Emily, who usually stayed out of the drama, sent me a screenshot from Facebook. It was a post from Sophia. "Please pray for my sister Clara. She's had a mental breakdown following a minor car accident. She's currently missing and acting erratically. We are so worried about her state of mind. If you see her, please contact us immediately. Hashtag mental health awareness. Hashtag pray for Clara." "They're painting me as crazy," I told Julian as he helped me settle onto the couch in the rental. My abdomen was still bound in compression bandages, and walking was a chore. That way, when I tell people they're moochers, no one will believe me. It's the hysterical woman defense. It's a classic narcissist extinction burst. Julian said, unpacking my medications on the kitchen counter. They're losing control, so they're trying to destroy your reputation to keep you isolated. If everyone thinks you're crazy, you have nowhere to go but back to them. He paused, holding up a pill bottle. But they forgot one thing. What? You have receipts. The next day, the biggest receipt of all walked through the front door. I was sitting at the dining table trying to organize 8 years of bank statements into a spreadsheet when there was a heavy, authoritative knock. Aunt Sarah, who was making tea, went to answer it. I heard a gasp and then a deep, gravelly voice that I hadn't heard in person for 5 years. "Hello, Sarah. Is she here?" I stiffened. "Grandpa!" Arthur Carver walked into the room. My father's father, the patriarch. He was 78 years old, a retired industrial tycoon who had built a shipping empire from scratch. He was a man made of granite and old-school principles. He wore a 3-piece suit even on a Tuesday and leaned heavily on a cane with a silver lion's head handle. My parents had always kept me away from him. He's grumpy, they'd say. He doesn't like children. He's traveling. As I got older, I realized they were gatekeeping him, probably afraid that if we talked, I'd accidentally reveal something that contradicted their lies. Grandpa Arthur. I tried to stand, but the pain made me wince. "Sit down, girl," he commanded, though his eyes were softer than his voice. He walked over and looked at me. Really? Looked at me with a scrutiny that made me feel like a balance sheet he was auditing. "You look like hell." "I feel like it," I admitted. "Good. Pain clarifies the mind." He pulled out a chair and sat opposite me, placing his cane on the table with a thud. "I had a very interesting phone call from your father yesterday. He came to my office, begging." My stomach tightened. "Did he?" "He told me that you had gone off the rails. Drugs, he hinted. Said you had drained the family accounts and vanished. He wanted an advance on his inheritance to cover the emergency expenses until they could get you into a facility." "I'm not on drugs, Grandpa. I know you're not on drugs," he snapped, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm old Clara, not senile. I had my private investigator run a check on you the moment he left my office. I know you're a top-rated anesthesiologist. I know you have a credit score of 820, and I know you haven't drained any accounts that weren't yours." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a leather-bound checkbook. He tapped it against the table. "But here is what I don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. 10 years ago, when I stepped down from the company, I set up the Carver Family Trust. It was designed to pay for the maintenance of the estate, the taxes, and a modest stipend for Mark and Linda, so they could do whatever useless things they do. The house should be paid for. Why did Mark tell me the bank is threatening foreclosure? Because you stopped paying. The room went silent. The air left my lungs. "The trust," I whispered. "Grandpa." Mom and Dad told me the trust collapsed in 2015. They said bad investments wiped it out. That's why I started paying. They said they were going to lose the house. Arthur Carver's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. The veins in his neck bulged. His knuckles turned white on the cane. "Collapsed," he roared. The sound made Aunt Sarah jump in the kitchen. "That trust is worth $15 million. It pays out $20,000 a month specifically for the household expenses. I never saw a dime," I stammered. "They told me they were broke. Dad said his heart condition. He said the stress of the debt was killing him. I paid the mortgage, Grandpa, for 8 years. $4,500 a month, plus the insurance, plus the repairs." Grandpa Arthur stared at me. Then he looked at the stack of papers on the table, my bank statements. He reached out a trembling hand. "Show me." I slid the papers over. He flipped through them. Page after page of transfers. Chase Mortgage, Mercedes-Benz Financial, Greenwood Country Club, Sophia Tuition, Sophia PR Firm. "Good God," he whispered. "They didn't just spend the trust money. They spent the trust money on themselves, and then they enslaved you to pay for the things the trust was supposed to cover. They double-dipped. They stole from me, and they stole from you." He closed the folder. The fury in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying calm. It was the look of a man who had hostilely taken over corporations and crushed competitors for sport. "They have been living like kings," he muttered. "2 incomes, one from my trust, one from your blood and sweat. And they gave you nothing." "They gave me a complex," I said quietly. "Sarah." Grandpa barked without looking back. "Get me a whiskey. Neat." He looked back at me. "Clara, get a notebook. A red one if you have it. Colors matter. Red for debt, red for blood." "What are we doing?" "We are building a ledger," he said. "I want every single cent you spent, every text message asking for money, every email guilt-tripping you. We are going to document the last 8 years down to the penny, and then we are going to the solstice party." "The solstice party?" I asked. "Grandpa, I can't go there. It's Sophia's influencer ball this year. They'll humiliate me." "They're planning to," he agreed. "I have sources. They intend to stage an intervention in front of the guests. They want to force you to sign a power of attorney so they can control your finances for your own good." I felt sick. Then why would I go? "Because," Grandpa smiled, and it was a smile full of teeth. "You are not going as the victim. You are going as the executioner, and I am going to give you the axe." We spent the next 3 days working. It was grueling. I had to relive every manipulation. The time Dad faked a cardiac episode so I would pay for their trip to Cabo, the doctor said I need sea air Clara. The time Mom cried for 3 hours because she couldn't afford Sophia's entry fees for a pageant, and I transferred my rent money to cover it. We printed everything. We highlighted the dates. We cross-referenced them with the trust payouts Grandpa had access to. The picture that emerged was grotesque. In the same month, I paid $4,500 for the mortgage because we're eating ramen Clara. They had received a $20,000 disbursement from the trust and spent $12,000 of it on a diamond necklace for Sophia. "This isn't just greed," Aunt Sarah said, looking at the spreadsheet on day 3. "This is predatory." On the 4th day, I had to go back to the hospital, not as a patient, but to the administrative wing to file my disability paperwork and meet with HR. Julian insisted on escorting me. "I have a bad feeling," he said, as we walked through the glass doors of the atrium. "Your sister posted a location tag checking in at the hospital an hour ago. Caption, 'Fighting for my family.'" "She's here." I stopped looking around the busy lobby. There, Julian pointed. Near the elevators, my parents and Sophia were holding court. They had a camera crew, actually just a guy with a DSLR, probably one of Sophia's friends, and they were talking to the receptionist. When they saw me, the performance began instantly. "Clara!" My mother shrieked. It was a theatrical wailing sound. She ran toward me, arms open. "Oh, thank God we found you." I stepped back, wincing as the movement pulled at my stitches. Julian stepped in front of me, his chest broad and blocking her path. "Mrs. Carver." Julian said, his voice ice cold. "Step back. You are harassing a patient." "I am her mother." Linda sobbed, playing to the onlookers in the lobby. "My daughter is sick. She's confused Clara Honey come home. We forgive you. We know you're not yourself right now. The drugs." "What drugs, Mom?" I asked, my voice cutting through her theatrics. I stepped around Julian, standing tall despite the pain. "The antibiotics, or the painkillers I'm taking because I had an organ removed while you were drinking champagne. Don't do this here," Dad hissed, stepping up beside Mom. He looked tired, his suit slightly rumpled, the stress of the missing money was showing. "You're making a scene. You're embarrassing the family." "You embarrassed the family when you left me to die?" I said loud enough for the receptionists to hear. Sophia aimed her phone at me. "Guys," she said to her live stream audience, "this is what I'm dealing with. She's so aggressive. It's the trauma. Clara, please just sign the papers so we can get you help." "What papers?" I asked. Dad pulled a document from his jacket. "It's a temporary guardianship, just until you're stable. It gives us authority to handle your accounts and medical decisions. We just want to take the burden off you." I looked at the paper, then I looked at the camera. Then I looked at my father. "You don't want to take the burden off me," I said clearly. "You want to put the burden back on. You want access to my bank account because the mortgage is due, and you spent all your money on—" I gestured to Sophia's designer handbag, that. "You are delusional," Mom shouted, her mask slipping. "You ungrateful little—" "Security!" Julian barked. 2 uniformed guards were already moving in. "Escort these people off the property," Julian ordered. "And if they return, call the police for trespassing." "You can't do this," Sophia screamed as a guard took her arm. "Do you know who we are? I have 100,000 followers." "I don't care if you have 1,000,000, the guard said, dragging her toward the revolving doors. My father looked at me one last time before he was pushed away. There was no love in his eyes, only panic. "You're making a mistake, Clara. You need us. You're nothing without this family." "I guess we'll see," I said. As the door spun shut behind them, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Grandpa Arthur standing near the gift shop. He had seen the whole thing. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "I'm terrified." "Good," he said, handing me the red notebook he had been holding. "Fear keeps you sharp. The solstice party is in 2 days. Go buy a dress, Clara, buy a red one, and make sure it's expensive. You're paying for it with my money this time." I took the notebook. It felt heavy in my hands, dense with the weight of stolen years. "Grandpa," I asked, "what happens at the party?" He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "We turn on the projector." The summer solstice soiree was an annual Carver tradition, a display of wealth that had been hollow for a decade. As Julian's car crunched over the gravel of the long, winding driveway, I looked up at the estate. It was a Georgian monster of red brick and white pillars bathed in golden floodlights that hid the peeling paint on the upper cornices and the moss creeping up the north wall. To the 300 guests sipping champagne on the lawn, it looked like old money. To me, it looked like a parasite that had been feeding on my bank account for 8 years. "Ready?" Julian asked, putting the car in park. He looked dashing in a tuxedo, but his hand rested on the door handle with the tension of a bodyguard, not a guest. "No," I said, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "But let's do it anyway." Grandpa Arthur had been right about the dress. I had spent $3,000 my own money for once on a floor-length gown of crimson silk. It was structured sharp and violent. It didn't look like something a mentally unstable woman would wear. It looked like armor dipped in blood. I paired it with diamond studs that Aunt Sarah had loaned me her grandmother's, the ones my mother had tried to steal for Sophia's prom years ago. We stepped out. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and expensive perfume. A string quartet played near the fountain, their melody fighting against the bass of the DJ booth set up for Sophia's live stream corner. The moment we reached the top of the stone steps, the air changed. The greeter, a woman I'd known since childhood, did a double take. Her eyes widened, scanning me for the erratic behavior my parents had promised. Instead, she got a cool, practiced smile. "Good evening, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "Lovely night for a reckoning, isn't it?" She stammered a greeting, and we walked past her into the lion's den. The ballroom was packed. My mother had outdone herself, likely putting the caterers on a credit card she assumed I would pay off next month. There were ice sculptures, a champagne tower, and a massive screen behind the stage, playing a loop of Sophia's greatest hits, modeling shots, charity galas she attended but didn't donate to, and carefully curated family photos. I noticed I wasn't in a single one. "There they are," Julian murmured, leaning close to my ear. My parents were holding court near the bar. My father, Mark, was laughing too loudly at a joke made by the local bank manager, a man he probably owed money to. My mother, Linda, was clutching the arm of the mayor's wife, her smile tight and frantic. And Sophia was in the center of the room wearing a white sequined gown that looked suspiciously bridal, surrounded by a ring of admirers and 2 cameramen. "Guys, the energy tonight is just magical." I heard her chirp, holding her phone up for a selfie video. "We've been through so much as a family lately, but love always wins." I felt a phantom ache where my spleen used to be. Love didn't win. Compound interest won. We made it 10 feet before the first shark circled. It was my mother. She spotted the red dress first. Her eyes narrowing, then widening in panic when she realized who was wearing it. She excused herself from the mayor's wife and beelined toward us, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble. "Clara," she hissed, grabbing my elbow with a grip that would leave a bruise. She plastered a fake smile on her face for the benefit of the room. "What are you doing here? We thought you were resting." "I'm feeling much better, Mother," I said, not lowering my voice. "The stitches are healing nicely. Thank you for asking." "Keep your voice down," she whispered, her smile straining. "You look ridiculous." "Red. At a summer white party, you're trying to draw attention to yourself. It's pathetic." "I thought red was appropriate," I said, pulling my arm free. "It's the color of the ledger." She blinked, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What? Look, just go to the library. Your father and I will meet you there in 5 minutes. We need to discuss the banking situation. The mortgage payment bounced Clara. It was humiliating. The bank called the house line. Did they... I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Sounds stressful. You should probably figure that out." "Don't play games with me." She snapped, her voice rising slightly. "You are going to fix this tonight. We have the papers ready. Dad explained everything to Dr. Evans. He's agreed to sign off on the competency hearing if you just cooperate. We can do this quietly or we can make a scene. It's your choice." "I'll take option B," I said, and walked past her. I spent the next 20 minutes circulating. It was a surreal experience. I could hear the whispers trailing behind me like smoke. "Is that Clara? I heard she had a breakdown. She looks fine to me. Did you hear she tried to sue her parents? I heard she's on painkillers." I smiled at everyone. I shook hands. I let them see the bruises on my arms from the IVs, which I had deliberately left uncovered. When people asked how I was, I gave them the unvarnished truth. I'm lucky to be alive. The internal bleeding was severe. It's a shame my family couldn't make it to the hospital, but I know how busy party planning can be. The shock on their faces was delicious. It was the first crack in the facade. At 8:30 p.m., the music stopped. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage, illuminating Sophia. She held a microphone, looking angelic and tearful. "Thank you all for coming." She breathed, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "This year has been hard. As many of you know, my sister Clara has been struggling with severe mental health issues. It's been a burden on all of us." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. I stood near the back next to the projector control booth. Julian was standing guard at the booth's door, his arms crossed. Inside the booth, Grandpa Arthur was waiting, but Sophia continued wiping a non-existent tear. "We are a family who supports each other. We don't give up on the people we love even when they hurt us. Tonight is about resilience. It's about the sacrifices my parents have made to keep this family standing." My father stepped up to the stage, taking the mic. "Thank you, Sophia. Yes, it's been a challenging road, but we are Carver strong." He raised his glass. "To family, to loyalty, to the truth." The voice boomed from the back of the room. "It wasn't mine. It was Grandpa Arthur's." The crowd gasped. Heads turned. My father froze his glass halfway to his mouth. Grandpa stepped out of the control booth, leaning on his cane but looking stronger than he had in years. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his old judicial robes, heavy and black. "Dad." Mark stammered into the microphone. "What are you? We didn't know you were coming." "Clearly," Grandpa said, his voice projecting without a mic. "Since you've been telling people I was in a nursing home for the last 3 years." He walked toward the stage, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. I fell in step beside him, the red dress flowing around me. We looked like a judge and his executioner. "I have a toast to make," Grandpa said, climbing the stairs to the stage. He took the microphone from my father's limp hand. "But first, I think we need to correct the narrative." "Dad, don't," my mother pleaded from the side of the stage. "Please, not here." "Especially here," Grandpa said. "Sophia, you mentioned sacrifices. You mentioned burdens. I think it's time we defined those terms." He gestured to the back of the room. "Clara, if you would..." I pulled the HDMI cable from my clutch where I had hidden it and plugged it into the laptop Julian had secured on the tech table. The screen behind the stage flickered. Sophia's face disappeared. In its place, a massive high-definition image appeared. It was a screenshot of a text message. Sender mom timestamp. Tuesday, 7:14 p.m. Clara, stop being a nuisance. We have VIP tickets, and we are not missing the red carpet for your drama. You have always been a burden on this family. Figure it out yourself. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the sculptures. 2 weeks ago, I said, my voice magnified by the lapel mic I had clipped on. I was in a car accident. My car flipped 3 times. I had a ruptured spleen and 4 broken ribs. I called my mother from the wreckage to ask her to watch my children so I could go into surgery. I pointed to the screen. That was her response. "That's fake!" Sophia shrieked, grabbing for the mic. "She photoshopped it! She's crazy!" Click. The slide changed. This time it was a photo taken by the paramedic. Me unconscious, covered in blood, trapped in the car. The timestamp was 7:10 p.m. "This is the drama I was creating," I said, "while you were drinking champagne at the precursor to this party. My father looked like he was having the cardiac event he had faked so many times. Clara, stop this. We can talk about this in private." "We're done talking in private, Dad," I said. "In private, you tell me I'm an investment that needs to pay out. In private, you tell me I owe you for my existence. So let's talk numbers." Click. The red book spreadsheet appeared. It was simple, stark, and damning. Total payments from Clara Bennett to Carver Estate, 2018 to 2026. Mortgage, $432,000. Lifestyle expenses, $115,000. Sophia Carver. Career support, $68,000. Grand total, $615,000. The crowd began to murmur. I saw the bank manager in the front row squinting at the screen doing mental math. For 8 years, Grandpa Arthur's voice cut through the rising noise. "My son Mark has told me that the family business failed. He told me they were destitute. He begged for allowances from the trust. I gave them $20,000 a month." Another slide appeared, the trust disbursements. "They took $20,000 a month from me," Grandpa roared, pointing a shaking finger at my parents. "And they took $6,000 a month from her. They were pulling in $30,000 a month tax-free, and they still made their daughter pay the mortgage. It was for the family." My mother screamed, abandoning all pretense of poise. "We had to maintain appearances. We had to keep up the image for Sophia's career. Clara doesn't need the money. She's a doctor. She's selfish." Selfish. I laughed, and it was a cold, jagged sound. "Mom, I drove a 2014 Honda Civic. I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years. I wore scrubs to dinner because I was picking up extra shifts to pay for your therapy retreats in Sedona." I turned to Sophia. She was shrinking, trying to hide behind a floral arrangement. "And you," I said, "the self-made influencer. You told your followers you bought your condo at 24. Who paid the down payment, Sophia? Who paid the HOA fees every month?" I clicked the remote. A bank transfer receipt appeared. Recipient, Sophia Carver. Memo, condo, HOA. Amount, $850. "You're ruining my life." Sophia wailed, mascara running down her face. "I'm gonna lose my brand deals." "You never had brand deals, honey," I said softly. "You had me." My father lunged. It was a desperate, clumsy move. He came at me with his hands reaching for the laptop, his face twisted in a rictus of rage. "Turn it off," he screamed. Before he could reach me, Julian stepped out from the shadows. He didn't hit my father. He simply intercepted him, holding him back with one arm like a bouncer handling a drunk. "Don't touch her," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. "Security," my father yelled. "Get them out. They're trespassing." "Actually," Grandpa Arthur said, pulling a document from his robe, "we're not." The room quieted again. Grandpa unfolded the paper. It was thick legal stock with a gold seal at the bottom. "You see, Mark," Grandpa said, enjoying every syllable. "When I set up the trust, there was a clause, the misappropriation clause. It states that if any beneficiary uses trust funds for fraudulent purposes, the trustee, me, has the right to dissolve the asset distribution immediately." He ripped the checkbook he had been holding in half and threw the confetti pieces at my father's feet. As of this morning, the trust is frozen. You don't have a dime, but that's not the best part. He handed the document to me. I looked at it. I knew what it was, but seeing my name in the heavy black ink made my knees weak. The mortgage, I said, reading the text to the room. The mortgage on the Carver estate was held by First National Bank, but since I have been the one making the payments for 96 consecutive months, and since the original loan was co-signed by me under false pretenses, I looked up at my parents. They were pale gray ghosts of the people who had terrorized me. I exercised my right to buy out the note, I said. Grandpa Arthur provided the bridge loan this morning. The bank was very happy to transfer the title to the person who actually pays the bills. I held the deed up. This house isn't yours, Dad, it's mine. My mother collapsed. It wasn't a faint, she just sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands. No, you can't. We have nowhere to go. Figure it out, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The guests were staring their champagne warm in their hands. They looked from the weeping woman on the floor to the screaming man being held back by a surgeon to the influencer hyperventilating in the corner. Then slowly the bank manager in the front row set his glass down on a table. He turned and walked toward the exit. It was a signal. The mayor's wife followed, then the neighbors, then the photographers. "Wait!" Sophia screamed, running toward the retreating crowd. "Wait, it's not true. Don't leave the gift bags. We have gift bags." But they didn't stop. The exodus was silent and brutal. Within 5 minutes, the ballroom was empty of guests. The only people left were the staff who were awkwardly clearing plates and my family. "You ungrateful bitch!" My father spat, straightening his jacket, though he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "After everything we did for you, we raised you, we put a roof over your head." "And I bought the roof," I said, "and now I'm evicting you from under it." "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "You're our daughter, you won't let us starve." I looked at him. I looked for the man who was supposed to protect me. I looked for the father who should have been at the hospital. I found nothing but a vacuum of need. "You have 24 hours, I said. "Anything left in the house after sunset tomorrow belongs to me. I suggest you start packing the silver. It's the only thing you own that's worth anything." "Clara, please." My mother wept, reaching for the hem of my red dress. "We're family." I stepped back, the silk swishing out of her reach. "No," I said. "We're relatives. And as I learned in the ambulance, that's not enough anymore." I turned to Grandpa and Julian. "I'm ready to go." We walked out of the ballroom, leaving them in the wreckage of their own party. The loop of Sophia's photos was still playing on the screen behind them, a silent slideshow of a life that never really existed. As we reached the car, Julian opened the door for me. That, he said, was better than surgery. "The patient lived," I said, looking back at the house one last time. "But the tumor has been removed." The drive away from the estate was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of the grave. It was the silence of a bomb disposal unit driving away from a successfully detonated site. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the solstice party began to ebb, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that thrummed in my marrow. I sat in the passenger seat of Julian's car, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of amber. Grandpa Arthur was in the back, humming a tune I hadn't heard in 20 years. "You know," Grandpa said, breaking the silence as we turned onto the highway, "I haven't had that much fun since I hostilely took over Jenkins Shipping in '98. I let out a breathy laugh, leaning my head against the cool glass. "I think I might throw up." "That's normal." Julian set his hand, briefly leaving the gear shift to squeeze my shoulder. "It's the crash, not the car crash, the emotional one. You just amputated your entire history, Clara. It's going to hurt before it feels better." "It doesn't hurt," I whispered, surprised to find it was true. "It feels light, terrifyingly light." We stayed at a hotel that night. I couldn't go back to the Airbnb, and I certainly wasn't going to the estate. Julian booked a suite, acting as my Praetorian guard, while Grandpa took the room next door. I slept for 12 hours, a dreamless, coma-like sleep that I hadn't achieved since medical school. When I woke up, the sun was high and harsh. It was the day of the eviction. The deadline I had given them, sunset, was absolute. But I knew my parents. They would assume I was bluffing. They would assume that if they just stayed put, if they just refused to pack, I would crumble. They were banking on the Clara of yesterday, the daughter who apologized for taking up space. They didn't know the Clara of today had a deed in her purse and a moving company on speed dial. I met the movers at the estate gates at 2 p.m. I had hired Titan Relocation, a company that specialized in high-conflict evictions. The foreman, a man named Mike, who looked like he could lift a refrigerator with one hand, nodded at me. "We have the sheriff on standby just in case," Mike said. "You want us to start with the big stuff? Start with everything." I said, "Whatever isn't packed goes on the curb." I pulled up the driveway, Julian following close behind in his car. The house looked different in the daylight, shabbier exposed. The manicured lawn was littered with plastic cups from the party the night before, the debris of a celebration that had ended in disaster. My key still worked. I unlocked the front door and walked in. The scene inside was chaotic. My mother was sitting on the floor of the foyer, surrounded by boxes of china she hadn't started packing. My father was on the phone, screaming at someone, probably a lawyer who had just told him he had no case. Sophia was nowhere to be seen. When the door opened, the air left the room. My mother looked up, her eyes swollen and red. "You came," she said, her voice trembling. "I told Mark you wouldn't come. I told him you were just angry." "I am angry," I said calmly, "but that's irrelevant. The movers are here." Movers. My father slammed his phone down on the antique console table. "You can't do this, Clara. You can't just throw us out on the street. We have rights. Squatters' rights." "You're not squatters," I said, checking my watch. "You're guests who overstayed their welcome by 8 years. And according to the deed transfer you signed 5 years ago to get that refinancing loan, the one you didn't read, because you were too busy planning a vacation, you are tenants at will. The will has expired." I signaled to Mike. "Start with the living room." "No, don't you touch that," my mother shrieked as a mover picked up a Ming vase. "That's a family heirloom." "Actually," I said, "I paid for that at auction 3 years ago when you said you needed it to complete the room. It stays. It's mine." "You are a monster," my father roared, stepping toward me. Julian stepped in front of me, his posture relaxed but ready. "Mr. Carver, I strongly suggest you focus on packing your personal effects. Clothes, toiletries, anything else is subject to the lien for unpaid rent." "Unpaid rent," Dad sputtered. "I'm her father. And you owe her $600,000, Grandpa Arthur said, walking through the open door. He looked fresh, rested and delighted. "I did the math this morning. If we charge interest, it's closer to $800. The next 3 hours were a blur of noise and movement. The movers were efficient machines stripping the house of the illusions my parents had built. My mother wept the entire time, following the workers around, clutching a jewelry box. My father paced, making empty threats, calling friends who didn't answer, realizing in real time that his social capital had evaporated the moment the trust was frozen. And then Sophia appeared. She came down the grand staircase wearing oversized sunglasses and a tracksuit, holding her phone up, recording. "Guys," she narrated to her screen, her voice thick with fake tears. "I am literally shaking right now. My sister is evicting us. She's throwing her own family out. Look at this cruelty. Look at my poor mother." She turned the camera to me. "Clara, say hi to my followers. Tell them why you hate your family." I didn't look away. I looked directly into the lens. "I'm evicting you because you're 26 years old and you've never paid a bill in your life. The free ride is over, Sophia." "You're just jealous," she screamed, the influencer mask slipping. "You've always been jealous of me because I'm beautiful and you're just boring. You're a boring doctor who nobody cares about." She rushed down the stairs, dropping the phone. She came at me with her hands curled into claws. It was a tantrum, a child's rage in a woman's body. "I hate you," she shrieked, lunging. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Julian stepped sideways, interposing himself, but he didn't touch her. He just stood firm. Sophia, blinded by her own fury, tried to swerve around him, caught her expensive sneaker on the edge of the rug, and went down hard. She sprawled onto the marble floor, sliding into a stack of boxes. It wasn't graceful. It was pathetic. "My ankle," she wailed, clutching her leg. "He pushed me. He assaulted me. Mom called the police. He broke my leg." "I have that on video," Mike the mover said, pointing to the body cam on his chest. "He didn't touch you, miss. You tripped." "Get up, Sophia," I said, looking down at her. "The ambulance isn't coming for a bruised ego." By 6 p.m., the house was empty of people but full of my things. My parents stood on the curb. They had managed to pack 4 suitcases and a few boxes of clothes. The Mercedes and the BMW were still in the driveway. "The keys," I said, holding out my hand. "Clara," my father pleaded, his voice breaking. "How are we supposed to get around? We have nowhere to go. Uncle Frank said we could stay in the guest house, but it's 20 miles away." "Uber is an app," I said. "Download it. The cars are leased in my name. I'm returning them to the dealership tomorrow to stop the bleeding on my credit score." My father stared at me. For a moment, I saw the hate in his eyes, pure and unadulterated. He wanted to hit me. He wanted to crush me. But he was powerless. He threw the keys at my feet. "I hope you rot in this house." "I'm not staying," I said, picking up the keys. "I'm selling it. It smells like lies." I watched them wait for the taxi. My mother sat on her suitcase looking like a deposed queen. Sophia was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to spin the assault narrative. My father just stared at the ground. When the taxi arrived, they loaded their bags in silence. My mother looked back once. "We loved you," she called out a final desperate manipulation. "No," I said loud enough for her to hear. "You loved what I could do for you." The taxi drove away. I stood in the driveway of the estate, surrounded by the silence of the evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. "It's done," Julian said, coming up beside me. "It's done," I repeated. The fallout was swift and brutal, just as Grandpa had predicted. Sophia tried to post the video of her assault, editing it to make it look like Julian had shoved her. But she underestimated the internet. A guest from the party had leaked the full video of the projector presentation. It went viral within hours. #TheLedger became a trending topic. People didn't see a victim in Sophia. They saw a spoiled brat who had lived off her sister's trauma. The internet sleuths found the body cam footage from the movers. Mike had uploaded it to debunk her claims. Sophia wasn't just canceled, she was incinerated. Her follower count dropped by 200,000 in a week. Her sponsors, mostly drop-shipping companies, issued statements distancing themselves. My parents fared no better. Without the illusion of wealth, their social circle evaporated. The country club revoked their membership when the dues bounced. The friends they had entertained for years suddenly had full voicemails. They were forced to move into Uncle Frank's guest house, a small converted garage with no air conditioning. Uncle Frank, a man who had worked in construction his whole life and hated pretension, made them pay rent. He made them get jobs. I sold the estate 3 months later. I didn't want the money, but I took it. I used the proceeds to pay off my student loans in one lump sum. The rest I put into a trust, a real one, for my twins. I didn't stay in the city. I bought a house on the lake 40 minutes away. It wasn't a mansion. It was a sprawling, glass-fronted A-frame nestled in the pines. It had a dock, a garden, and enough bedrooms for me, the twins, and guests who actually loved me. Aunt Sarah moved into the cottage on the property. She helped me with the garden. We grew tomatoes and basil, and for the first time in my life, I learned what it felt like to come home to a place that didn't demand a toll. Dr. Julian Hayes became just Julian. We didn't rush anything. We took it slow. But on Sunday mornings, he would come over for pancakes, and I would watch him teach Leo how to fish off the dock. He didn't look at me like an ATM. He looked at me like I was the catch. 1 year later, I was shopping at a grocery store near Uncle Frank's part of town. I was picking out apples, humming to myself, when I heard a familiar voice. "Welcome to Fresh Mart, carts are to your left." I froze. I turned slowly toward the entrance. There, wearing a green vest that was a size too small, standing on a rubber mat, was my father. He looked older. His hair was completely white, and the arrogant posture he had carried for decades was gone, replaced by the slump of a man whose feet hurt. He was greeting customers, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was working, actually working. I watched him for a moment. I saw a woman brush past him without acknowledging him, and I saw the flicker of annoyance on his face quickly suppressed. He was experiencing the invisibility he had forced on me for years. Then he looked up. His eyes locked with mine across the produce section. The automatic doors whooshed open and closed a rhythmic sigh between us. He straightened up. His mouth opened slightly. I saw a flash of hope in his eyes, the instinctual belief that I was there to save him, that I would see him in that vest and break, that I would pull out my checkbook and restore his dignity. "Clara," he mouthed. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had let me bleed in a ditch so he could go to a party. I looked at the man who had called me a burden. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. He was just a stranger in a green vest. I turned back to the apples, selected a perfect Honeycrisp, and placed it in my basket. I walked to the other set of registers, the ones furthest from the door. I paid for my groceries with my own money, walked out the side exit, and got into my car. I didn't look back. I drove home to the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw them. Julian was at the grill flipping burgers. Grandpa Arthur was sitting in an Adirondack chair reading a story to Mia. Aunt Sarah was pouring lemonade. Leo was running across the grass, chasing a golden retriever puppy we had adopted last week. They looked up as I stepped out of the car. "Mommy!" Leo shouted, tackling my legs. "Hey!" Julian smiled, waving a spatula. "You're just in time. The sunset is about to start." "I know," I said, picking up my son and breathing in the smell of pine needles and charcoal smoke. I didn't miss it. I walked over to them, to the people who had chosen me when I had nothing to give but myself. I sat down next to Grandpa, who patted my hand. "Good day," he asked. "The best," I said. I looked out at the water, at the reflection of the life I had built from the ashes of the old one. I had lost a family, yes, but I had found a home, and the difference was this foundation wasn't built on debt. It was built on the solid ground of knowing exactly who I was, and I was free. This is the end of my story, but I hope it's the beginning of yours. You know, for the longest time, I thought walking away made me the villain. I thought that saying no was a betrayal. But standing on that dock, watching the sunset with the people who actually showed up for me, I realized something that changed everything. You cannot heal in the same environment where you got sick. Clara didn't just lose a family, she saved herself. And if there is anyone watching this right now who feels like they are setting themselves on fire just to keep others warm, please put down the match. You deserve a love that doesn't require a transaction. If this story sparked a fire in you, or if you know someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away, please share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change with a simple link. And if you believe that family is about loyalty, not just DNA, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are building a community of survivors here, and I want you in it. Now, if you enjoyed watching Clara take back her power, you are not going to want to miss the video on your screen right now. It's about a sister who was treated like a servant at her own brother's wedding until she revealed a secret that silenced the entire room. Trust me, the ending is even more satisfying than this one. Click right here, and I'll see you in the next story.